Thank you guys so much for coming out. My name's Jimmy D'Onofrio. I'm with Americans United for Change. We are so fortunate to be able to put the middle class first bus here to Portland today. It's the second day of our 18-state, one-month bus tour. Like I said, we're excited to be here. It's really important that this November we hold Republicans accountable for taking the middle class for granted, and we need to hold them accountable by electing good Democrats, like a couple of the great Democrats I have behind me. I'm going to hand it off to former Governor Ted Strickland, who is a great friend of ours. We're very lucky to have him here, and he's going to run the show for us.
Thank you, Jimmy. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us here this morning in beautiful Portland, Maine. As an Ohioan, I can tell you that I have come to love this state. I've come here many times, and the beauty of Maine is unsurpassed in my judgment, and the people here have always been warm and welcoming to me. So thank you for being here, and I'm especially happy to be here because Mike Michaud is my personal friend. I had the great privilege of serving with Mike in the U.S. House of Representatives, and we served together on the Veterans Affairs Committee, and so I know Mike's dedication to the men and women who have served our country in the military, and his commitment to those who have returned and in need of jobs and health care and the kind of support they need and deserve as a result of being in our military. I've also come today because the group that I work with, the Center for American Progress Action Fund, has recently completed a study called the Middle Class Squeeze. And the fact is that in our country today, the middle class is working harder and they are finding themselves falling farther and farther behind. Just one statistic I'd like to share with you. Between the years 2000 and 2012, the salaries or the wages, the incomes in this country have remained flat for the average working person, and in some cases actually declined. And yet the costs of maintaining a middle class quality of life, and I'm talking about the cost of health care, the cost of education, especially higher education, the cost of child care, the cost of housing, these fundamental factors that enable Americans to live a middle class life, those costs have increased well over $10,000 in that time period, while wages have remained flat. I want to share with you the fact that since the recovery began, as we moved out of this Great Recession, 95% of all income gains since the recovery have accrued to the top 1% of U.S. households. Think of that. 95% of all the income gains have gone to the top 1% of U.S. households. And so the middle class in America is being squeezed today, and the middle class and working people in the great state of Maine are facing these challenges. And what has the current governor done in the face of these challenges? Well, he has refused to expand Medicaid so that more people from this great state could have access to health care. In fact, he has vetoed the expansion of Medicaid, I'm told, on 3 different occasions. He has refused to increase the minimum wage in the great state of Maine. In fact, he has vetoed efforts to increase the minimum wage. And these things are happening as the middle class is finding more and more challenge just simply to remain a part of the middle class. Now, there is a candidate that has a plan that can help the middle class and those struggling to get into the middle class. And his name is Mike Michaud. And as I said to you earlier, I know Mike very well because we sat beside each other on the Veterans Affairs Committee for some years while we were both serving in the House of Representatives. And I can say to those of you here and to people throughout the state of Maine that no one has worked harder for veterans and their families than Mike Michaud. He has been a tireless advocate for the men and women of our military. And so I've come here because I believe in this man. I know his values, I know his commitment to public service, and I know that he is a former working guy in terms of organized labor. He was a member of the Steelworkers Union, as was my father for 46 years. And so he is a person that has a plan for this state, for the working people of this state. And I am pleased and proud to call him my friend and to be here to show support for him today. And so let's welcome your next governor and our good friend, Congressman Mike Michaud. Mike.
Thank you very much, Ted, for that very kind and very generous introduction. I want to thank you for coming back to the state of Maine again, and hopefully you'll make many trips back here in the state of Maine. So, and I want to thank all of you for being here today as well. It's great to be here with Governor Strickland, Mayor Brennan, and my good friend Shenna Bellows, and all of you here today. We are here today because we all believe that it's time to create an economy that works for everyone, not just the wealthiest among us. Right now, our state is being held hostage, being held back by a lack of leadership in the Blaine House. Anger and divisiveness is keeping us from moving forward in this state. If we don't change that things now, we'll never be able to turn this around. Simply put, we have to do better as a state. The challenges we face cannot be solved by one person or one party. And I've demonstrated that I can bring Democrats, Republicans, and independents together to solve these problems we're facing here in the state of Maine. And we're going to need to commit to compromise, and we're going to have to protect the jobs that we have here at home already and grow the economy so that everyone has a chance to live, work, and raise a family here in the state of Maine. As you heard earlier, I worked at Great Northern Paper Company for over 29 years. I understand what it means to go to work every day and to worry about how we're going to make ends meet. I understand what people are going through and the hard times that they're facing here in Maine today. We've seen it just over the last several months here in Maine. We've lost more than 1,000 jobs, including friends, neighbors, and relatives, my colleagues I used to work with. Losing those jobs in mill towns like Millinocket, East Millinocket, Old Town, and now Bucksport. After 3.5 years of failed leadership from Governor LePage, Maine continues to lag behind almost in every other state in this country as it relates to job growth, economic development, and personal income. We need to do better. We must do better. We need to keep fighting to protect the jobs we have, but also we need to jumpstart our economy by investing in Maine's strength. And there is no greater strength in Maine than in our workforce. The hard-working men and women who made this state what it is today and continue to be our greatest assets here in the state of Maine. I'll start the state moving again with forward-moving thinking ideas that strengthens our middle class, supports our small businesses, and get our economy back on the right track. We'll start by cleaning up some of the unfinished business here in the state. And on day one of my administration, I'll be submitting legislation to the legislature to expand access to health care for the 70,000 Mainers, including 3,000 veterans who've been denied access of life-saving care by this governor. Not only is it the morally right thing to do, but it also will save Maine taxpayers millions of dollars and hold down the cost of health care and create jobs at the same time. And we're going to raise the minimum wage as well. I've done it before when I was president of the Maine Senate in an evenly divided Senate, 17-17-1 split. And I'll do it again if I'm elected governor.
Great.
Thank you. Because Maine workers deserve a raise. And we're going to help make sure that people who put in an honest day's work gets an honest day pay. That also means making sure that women earn equal pay for equal work by closing the wage gap. But there's so much more that we have to do here in the state of Maine. We need to protect our seniors. Our current governor has tried to cut funding for Meals on Wheels, for prescription drugs for seniors, and as you've all read in his own words, in his press release, in black and white, he even called Social Security and Medicare welfare. Our seniors deserve our respect. They deserve a governor who won't try to pull the rug out from underneath them for their lifetime of hard work they've put in. We also need to restore the stability and predictability to the budget process so that businesses and municipalities and entrepreneurs here in Maine can plan on what they're going to do for the future. That's why I've proposed a 10-year plan that includes predictability and steady investments in roads, bridges, rail, and broadband. We're going to put people to work, building the infrastructure that will drive our economy in a new age. We're going to take the politics out of the process so we can invest and focus on where the biggest impacts will be. We have so much potential here in the state of Maine, and I know that we can reach that potential by working together. Only blind partisanship is standing in the way. I won't let Maine stand still or let our economy left behind as the world changes all around us. I'll work to create an innovative economy by investing in clean energy jobs, technology, and making sure that we have a skilled and educated workforce that will propel our state into the future. We must increase our investments in research and development and help small business to grow. We must also make sure that our children have access to quality early childhood education and that higher education is more affordable for more children's graduates so they can get degrees. And we have to tell a positive story about our state and talk about the things that make Maine a great state. Over the last 4 years, we've seen a governor who's driven this state into dysfunction, where deadlines are missed, disabled, and job-creating businesses are driven off the state, out of the state. We have to return to the Maine way, where Democrats, Republicans, and independents can sit down, compromise, and find real solutions that help Maine people. And we need to end the fighting and bickering and to create a government that treats everyone fairly. And I'm committed to that goal. And I know that each and every one of you here are also committed to that goal. It's time to put the people first here in the state of Maine versus partisan politics that this governor has done over the last 3.5 years that he's been governor. So I want to thank all of you for coming out here today. Once again, Governor, I want to thank you for coming to the great state of Maine.
Thank you. Aren't you proud of this guy? Isn't it going to be good to have a working guy, someone who understands what ordinary people are going through in the governor's office? Thank you, Mike.
We like Mike.
We like Mike.
We like Mike! We like Mike! We like Mike! We like Mike!
Yeah. Did you hear the mic? I know it. Yeah. Well, we want all of Maine to hear that message. You know, as I said, Mike was a working guy before he went to Congress. He knows what it's like to really work for a living, and he has values that will enable him, when he's in the governor's office, to put the people of this state, the ordinary, hardworking people of this state, first. And I see these signs behind me. Hands off my Social Security. Give America a raise. These are messages that I believe most people in this great state and in my state of Ohio and across America really believe in. Now, we've got another person who's running for high office, the United States Senate here in the great state of Maine, whose father, I'm told, was a carpenter. And she's a person who has walked this state, walking some 350 miles from the north to the south of Maine in order to get her message out. She is concerned about the middle class squeeze that I tried to describe a little earlier. And she is working her heart out to represent this state in the United States Senate. And so it's my great privilege to introduce to you Shenna Bellows, someone who is a hard worker and will go to Washington and make you proud. Shenna.
Thank you, Governor. It's a great honor to be here with you today and to be here with Mike, our next governor. And thank you, everyone, seniors, workers, for coming out today, because this is so important. The number one issue in this election is jobs and the economy. We see it all across the state of Maine. The rich are getting richer, the poor are getting poorer, and the middle class is disappearing. And we need to stand up for these core middle class values like raising the minimum wage and protecting Social Security and equal pay for equal work. And on my walk across Maine, I met many Mainers who are really struggling right now. They feel like the country is on the wrong track. And I'll just share two stories that illustrate why it's so important that we elect Mike to the Blaine House and that we have working class leadership in Washington. I walked down through Millinocket. I saw the demolition crew tearing down the mill there. And I walked into Mattawamkeag. In Mattawamkeag, we had a town hall meeting, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I talked about the need to increase Social Security benefits for our seniors and to protect Social Security for the next generation, and to do so in a fiscally responsible way by scrapping the cap. And afterward, Phyllis came up to me and she said, I'm living solely on Social Security, and sometimes my check doesn't make it to the end of the month, and so I put off filling a prescription. She said, I haven't done home repairs in a long time. I figure my house won't fall down before I die. And I thought about that for a minute. 1 in 3 Maine seniors is depending solely on Social Security, and their checks aren't making it to the end of the month. They're having to make difficult choices between food and medicine. And if we were to increase benefits for people like Phyllis, she could hire a carpenter, someone like my dad. That would be money in the local community. It would have a powerful economic multiplier effect for our whole community. And I walked down from Mattawamkeag into Orono. We had a house party in Orono. And Molly drove 2 hours to be at that house party. And after I spoke about the need for student loan reform to fix the student debt crisis that now exceeds $1 trillion in this country, she told me that her debt burden is so high, despite being an in-state resident at the University of Maine, that she's decided she doesn't think she can afford to fulfill a lifelong dream of going to medical school and becoming a doctor because her debt is too high. And I walked down through Lewiston, where I met Diane, who's going to speak today. And I walked into Oxford County, and in Oxford County I told that story, and Claire raised her hand and she said, Colin and I are living here in Colin's parents' house. We both found work in Oxford County, but Colin is paying about 30% of his take-home pay to pay off his student loans. And so we can't afford to move out and buy a home of our own. Our young people are putting off major life decisions. They're living with their parents. They're not able to buy a home. They're not able to pay their debts because of a failure of leadership by Washington Republicans who are obstructing progress in Washington. And there are key differences in this race. We've already seen under Governor LePage what the Republicans do when they're in charge. The attacks on workers, the attacks on women, the attacks on our local communities. And in Washington, there have been opportunities for change, for forward movement on these issues. And my opponent, Republican Susan Collins, had an opportunity to vote to raise the wage to $10.10 an hour, and she voted with Washington Republicans against it. She had an opportunity to vote for equal pay for equal work with the Paycheck Fairness Act, and she voted no twice. She had an opportunity to vote to expand affordable health care for Americans, and she voted against the Affordable Care Act, and she has co-sponsored a bill to repeal the Affordable Care Act. I will always stand up for workers. I will stand up for women, because it's who I am. It's where I come from. I'm proud to be the daughter of a carpenter and a home health care nurse. And I'm running for the United States Senate because working people deserve a voice in Washington.
Listen, if you have been listening to this, you understand that this young candidate is on your side. Healthcare, education, all the issues that are important to middle class and working class people is of concern to this candidate. So don't forget her. Don't forget her when you go to the polls to vote for Mike Michaud. You vote for this candidate, put her in the United States Senate.
Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.